Hi, how you
Afternoon.
doing, Rob?
I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, good, good. I'm glad we're in this meeting today because it's raining, so at least I'm not missing the sunshine.
Do you know what though, Karen? I did smile because Simon's gone off to walk Light the Lakes today for charity. You can
Oh, right.
imagine. I'm going to have some sport with that.
Oh,
He's
dear.
going to be wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and of course, it's
Oh.
chucking it down with rain.
Yeah, although it'd be cooler, right, for him
Well,
to.
yeah, that is true. Very
Yeah,
true.
so at least there's that. Yeah. So you're not doing it then, Rob?
No, we tend to we share them about. So he's off doing the Light the Lakes. So I'm here. Although I have got a bit of a confession.
Okay.
I've got because he's out, I've got to step out at about 3 quarter past 3 to
Okay.
go and say a few words at the close of a conference and award some medals.
Okay.
So, but looking at the agenda, I'm hoping I'm going to have got through most of my bits
Okay.
by then. But Mick I know is joining, so Mick can, if you're okay with that, then Mick will carry on, and I can always come back and rejoin if there's anything after that, if that works for you.
Oh, thank you, Rob. Yeah, no, that's great. Well, hopefully we'll get through as much as you're needed for before then.
Perfect.
That's fine. So it is 2 o'clock, and I think let's see who we've got from the committee. Mark, Lynn, Lois, Stephen. Okay. I know that we're going to be joined by Gail, so maybe I'm just going to give it a minute to see if she's going to join us. Welcome, everybody.
Karen, if I can just say, I think Abby's just informed us that the commissioner's running a little bit late. He had a meeting that was off-site that I think he thought was going to take place virtually. So he's travelling on the way back, but he'll join us as soon as he gets in.
Okay, that's fine. So I'm just going to give it a minute.
Hi, Gail.
Oh, there's Gail.
Hi, Rob. You okay?
I'm good. Are you okay?
Good. I'm very good, thank you.
Yeah, great. So are we ready to go, everybody? Yes, I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll take that as a yes. And welcome to Shirley Dudfield. So that's great. Thank you. So I'll start the meeting now. Any apologies, anybody?
We've received apologies from Chris Keeley and Rich Ward.
Thank you. And I think Linda from our end said she might be a little bit late, but that was all. Any urgent business?
None notified, Chair.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest?
No.
No. Great. Minutes then of the last meeting, which I wasn't at, but looks like a very interesting meeting. So I'll just hand over to other committee members who were there, just to give any comments.
Hi there, everybody. I've got a dreadful internet connection, so I'll only put my camera on for briefly. But as I chaired the last meeting, shall I take us through the minutes?
Yes, please, Mark.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Karen. I was covering for you in your absence, so it's back to much better business as usual today. And apologies for making a mess of it last time, folks. But let's look through the keep moving, keep going.
Keep going.
There's nothing in the minutes, though, good minutes, that I would wish to raise as the chair of that meeting. Are there any errors or omissions that people who were in attendance want to highlight? I'm going to read
no errors or omissions, Mark. I just wondered what the situation was with Iris Lightfoot. So the previous meeting, she was invited and she tried to attend, but had technical issues, and I wasn't sure if she was supposed to have been invited to this meeting or a link was going to get sent to her with regards to what we looked at. So I just wondered if that did happen.
Yeah, if I can come in there, Chair. These are actions on the action sheet as well. We did contact Iris and we have sent her a link to the recording of the meeting and a link for this meeting. We haven't had any response back, but we will continue to invite her to meetings where Stop and Search is on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mark is a little bit frozen by the looks of it, but so I'll just carry on. Anything else on the minutes? Okay. Any matters arising from the minutes? I won't go page by page. I'm just going to take the whole lot.
Yeah.
And it'd be great if you could indicate using the raise hand function, because it's hard. I can't see everybody because of people having videos off. So just use your hand raise. Okay, so there's no matters arising. I think they're all on the rolling action sheet.
Yes, they
anyway, Angela. So thank you very much for the great minutes with no corrections. And let's move on to the rolling action sheet.
Yeah, if you want me to
Yes,
just mention
please.
a few things, certainly on the first action there with the consultation with Unison, the gentleman who is the main person in Unison has had some sickness recently and has been away, I think, for some time, you know, requiring hospital. So that's sort of delayed that conversation taking place, but we'll keep it there, and as soon as he's fully back, I'll get in touch with him. I think we've mentioned Iris and the coercive powers and her attendance. I think there's someone here for you, Rob, which I won't talk about.
Yeah, shall I back on that? I mean, the social media one that's titled there, I'd actually gone back and had a word with Julia, and she'd sent in an email after the meeting asking whether reports could include something around the equality impact assessment. I was going to ask Karen for a bit of clarity as to going back, really, because I wasn't in that meeting. What do we think the question is? Is it, do we carry out equality impact assessments, and as a consequence, what does that then mean for how the organisation changes as a result of carrying out the equality impact assessment? Because I wasn't there, what's the context? What's the issue we're looking at?
Well, from generally, because I've raised it on a number of occasions, generally it's where a report has equality impact implications and then there's nothing.
Right.
Or it just says there are no equality implications. I don't think that's sufficient. There's always an equality implication. So it's just about paying that a little bit more attention. And I'm not asking for full equality impact assessments to be done, just where people think the impact is.
Right. No, that's really useful, because I think that's what Julia had actioned, but now I thought it's easier just to ask the question, Karen, and then I can look at it outside of that. So, and here's
if there are any new policies or reviews of existing policies which have required a full equality impact assessment, it'd be great to see them. But that won't be the case in all of the reports.
No, and things around transformation and change, naturally, I think we could probably bring that back and have a bit of transparency around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm very conscious the Police and Crime Commissioner has joined. So,
right. Hi.
I'm here. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I was just out watching some taser training.
Good afternoon.
No doubt has some ethical dimension to it, but I'm back now. So.
Well, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us. There's definitely we've seen some of the taser stuff as well, and we visited some of it, so it's very interesting. So great to have you here. Would you like to just say a couple of words, Rupert, at the beginning, because we've not really started on the full agenda?
Okay. I was about to say, and where on the agenda have we got to? But obviously
we're just on the minutes and matters arising, so rolling actions. So if you'd like to just say a few words before we carry on.
Well, I mean, to be honest, of all the different bits and pieces that I've sort of sat in so far, this is the one where I don't want to talk. I want to listen to you guys, because you can imagine during the course of the campaign, when I was, sort of trying to educate myself on policing and victim support and, all the other bits and pieces that a PCC's job does. The public were mainly asking me what I would consider doing questions. What are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about that? They weren't asking me the why questions. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? Which is what you lot do, if I understand your remit correctly. So the why isn't something I've had to educate myself on, and it isn't something I've had to learn. So what I was hoping to do actually was to listen to all of you, to get a feel for the why, but also to see how your committee operates, because all bodies like this, be they committees or panels or boards or whatever it's called, they all operate in a different way, and the dynamics are always different and so on. So really this afternoon, I'm here to learn. All right. Now in future, I might want to say something. In future, I might, I don't know, I might think, by gum, that meeting I've just had with Mr. Nixon, that was a bit rough, wasn't it? I'm gonna put that to the ethics committee. They can sort
I often think that.
I can imagine.
I'm wounded.
So that's great. Thank you.
It's very kind of you to ask me to say something, but I'm here to listen. So please carry on and I'll listen.
Okay. I'm just wondering if you would like us to do just very quick introductions of.
Oh, that would be useful. Yeah. Yes, who everybody is.
Yeah. So can I ask people? Yeah. So I'm Karen. I chair this committee, and I'm going to ask Mark to come on and just if he's, because his internet's a bit dodgy, but Mark Peel is the vice chair. Mark, are you there to say hello?
I am. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Congratulations on your election. Welcome to this meeting. I'm Mark Peel, and as most of the members on the committee, we've been around for a little while now.
Yeah.
And I've certainly been on the committee since its inception. So it's great to have you here this afternoon.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Lynn, can I go to you next?
Yes, just busy unmuting. Yeah, Lynn Richards, member of the Ethics Committee. Welcome.
Gail?
Hi, I'm Gail. I'm a member of the Ethics Committee, one of the newer members. I've been on the committee for about 18 months. New head of student media at Leicester College.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Lois?
Hi, my name is Lois Dugmore. I've been on the committee since the beginning. I have a specialist interest in mental health and work for the local NHS trust.
Thank you, Lois. Stephen?
So, Stephen Camus, I'm a senior lecturer in law at the University of Birmingham. Used to work at the University of Leicester, so I moved in the 1st of January. It's been a lovely time to move jobs, yeah, I've got a keen interest in policing as an academic criminal lawyer and criminal justice expert.
Brilliant.
Perfect, thank you. And Linda James will be joining us a bit later. I'm presuming you know everybody else, am I right? Shirley,
yes.
do you want to say something? Do you want us to introduce yourself? You can.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm just a hanger-on really. I am a volunteer chaplain, and I thought it might be
great
to join you and just see what occurs.
Good, thank
you. Anybody else? So there's I think you probably know everybody else. Okay, shall we press on?
Yep. Okay,
we were on the rolling actions sheet, and Rob, I'm sorry I cut you off halfway. I think.
No problem. I'm going to because I'm very conscious of time, Karen. So what I'll do is I'll pick up the pace a little bit. I think there's an outstanding action around the service specification for hate crime. We have done quite a lot of work on that. We've updated the strategy. We've now got a multi-agency group being stood up solely looking at hate crime, and that's being linked into Rupert in the policing crime plan that's being developed at the moment. So that's all being joined together. If you're happy, Karen, what I was going to suggest is I've had Wendy pull all those documents together, and we could circulate them with the minutes of today's meeting.
Yes, please. I was thinking on similar lines. Yeah.
Perfect. So that's all been drawn together, but I'm quite excited the fact that the group's being stood up, and we're going to start to see some action on that, which is good. There's a few actions relating to me around Stop Search. Stop Search is on the agenda, and I know we talked about it the last time we came together. So, I mean, the headlines for me, I introduced the DMU project last time, what we were doing around data analytics, which I think is quite cutting edge. And again, the offer is, would you like to see what the project scope is around with the DMU? So again, I've sort of teed that up that we can share that with you, and generally welcome some feedback. But I think I was expecting some feedback around data that you think we might want to link into that project.
You were expecting it from us?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the first action, Karen. It talks about members to send. So it talks about data. So I think we had quite a conversation around getting to a better level of granularity with some of our Stop Search data.
Yeah, we had a bit of conversation about it. Yeah, I wasn't there at the last meeting, but when we were discussing the Stop and Search paper this morning, there is a lot of comment on what kind of data we want. If that isn't sufficient, Rob, or we have more to say, we'll send you that on an email.
That would be great. I mean, Karen, that's where I think if I share with you what's in the project scope so far, and invite yourself and the committee to just send back where you think there might be some gaps on the data collection, we can refine that and make sure that the project is as broad as it needs to be. So I'd welcome receiving that. I think there's something in there around body worn video. What I can say is we're looking to, we will have a tracker and a KPI of where body worn video. So our expectation is that body worn video gets used in all occasions for Stop Search, and we'll be able to identify where it's not, and then we'll go and do some further exploratory work. So that will become quite commonplace, and it'll become part of our performance tracking. So I think if you're happy, we can bring back performance in that area in the future. I think there was a question around how we do Stop Search training. And again, I know you've had some input this morning around Stop Search and body worn video. So I don't know if you want me to expand on that. I think that's probably been linked in with the input you've had this morning.
Yes, and we had a few questions arising coming out of the videos that do relate to the kind of training, and but I think maybe again, this is something we can either feedback when we discuss that paper or after the meeting.
Okay, great. One thing I would say is that we're doing a lot of physical role plays now, and we're looking to bring in community members to be role actors.
Right.
So again, that whole bringing the community and the police together is in the training environment. So again, I'm looking for lots of volunteers that want to get involved in Stop Search training. And one of the things that I've been talking about in Force is those that have had a negative experience with Stop Search. It'd be good to bring them back to have them as role actors as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Okay.
Am I out of time? Am I out of time?
No. I don't know who that was. It wasn't me.
And then I think just staying with that theme, there was some. I think there's a few actions that got raised at the last meeting that I wasn't at, and it appears that the panel are asking for some additional data, and I'd really be up for a conversation about how we facilitate you having access to the data, because I think there's a bit about, do you request it, we then pull it, or do we allow a way that you can access sufficient data that you can interrogate it yourself? And it's just a different way of thinking about it potentially.
Yeah, I mean, that would be good if we had somewhere that we could access it. It would be great. You wouldn't have to keep asking you to bring papers. But yeah, that would be good.
I'm just thinking there's quite a lot of advanced work going on around bringing in our new data system around Power BI, and I think it's worthy of conversation outside the meeting as to what areas, because I think we could give direct access to some of that data, and then it'd be interesting what interpretation you make of it.
Okay.
As part of an assurance process.
Sure. What did you call it?
What, the system?
Yeah.
Power BI. Do you remember me talking about this before in terms of where we're going with our new performance framework?
No, but anyway, doesn't matter.
Perhaps one for a future agenda.
Okay.
We'll bring a demo back. How's that?
Okay, good.
And I think that's me done, isn't it? For the actions. Because there's a couple that are data related that I didn't know had been raised against me, but I'll gladly resolve that outside of the meeting.
Okay. Was there something on the impact of COVID-19 and mental health?
Yeah, I think they came at the last meeting, didn't they? Which
Okay.
you and I weren't at, Karen. But
okay.
And both of those appear to be data related, so I can pick those up.
All right, that's great. Angela, is there anything else?
Yeah, there is a couple. I mean, we've dealt with Iris Lightfoot and the Stop and Search meeting, which I mentioned earlier. The distribution of agendas, Action 36, I believe that's now complete, and members have hopefully received the format that they want their papers in. And Action 38 is the only other one for me, and it's about complaint reviews. I've had a discussion this morning, actually, Mick and I, and we plan to meet in the next 2 weeks face to face, where we'll pick that up. So we'll report back when that's happened. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the numbering might be, oh, no, that's right, it's carried over, that's fine. Okay, so that's the rolling actions. And is that okay, committee members?
Yes.
I don't see any hands, so I'm going to move on to paper A, which is Stop and Search. And we had quite a lengthy discussion about this, Rob, so there could be quite a few issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I anticipated that because we had quite a lengthy discussion in December, didn't we, around the Stop and Search as well.
Yeah. So I'm going to reserve my comment because it might be covered by other members of the committee. But would you indicate if you want to speak now, please, committee members? Okay, I have Lynn and then Gail and then Linda.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My first comment is referring to page A5 on the disproportionality information. And I think it would be really helpful if the format of the narratives was the same, because at the moment we've got a discrepancy here. So, for example, under the black disproportionality, it gives us clearly the ratio figure, 4.9. It doesn't give us the excess search figure, but I'm deducing it's over 700 from the graph. And it does give us what it would be, 165, if it was proportionate. And then below the Asian disproportionality, it gives us the ratio and it gives us the excess search number. So again, on that, the Asian, and also on the other ethnic disproportionality, it would just be great if it was always the same format, giving the same information, because it's a bit confusing otherwise.
I agree.
Thank you
very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Hi, mine was more of a general point, being a fairly new committee member. But from what I read in the paper and the summary, it just felt that the statistics around the disproportionality was just continuing. It wasn't improving from the data that I saw. And for me, it just felt like it was just evidence of racial bias. The other thing I wanted to make a comment on was, in terms of the data, for me, it would be really interesting to see an age and agenda profile, as well as the statistics there, just to have a look at that.
Thank you, Gail. Mark?
Yes, perhaps picking up from Gail. Gail's absolutely right to say that the figures haven't changed much. In fact, if you look on page A7.17, the first point paragraph of the summary, it says here quite clear they're broadly consistent with previous reporting. If I can take you to page A1 of this pack, which asks us the ethical questions here, number 6 suggests that the key question here is how to target the proportionate use of intelligence-led stop and search and reduce serious harm. We've been looking at Stop and Search now as an ethics and integrity committee for 5 years, and I don't think that is the key question. because the statistics haven't changed over the course to any great extent over the course of that 5-year period. And I suppose if I wanted to be direct with you, the key question would be, is it ethical for somebody from a black community to be around 5 times more likely to be stopped and searched than someone like me from a white community in Leicester? Because the answer to that question is clearly no, it's not ethical. When we've talked about stop and search before, Rob and I think other people too have suggested to us strongly that stop and search is a useful tool for the police, useful both as a mechanism of detecting crime and also as a deterrent for crime. And yet we learn in this paper that the arrest rate coming from stop and search is only around 15% over the course of the year. So the key question for me is not the proportionate use, the key question would be, does the cost of stop and search justify its use at all in any but the most exceptional of circumstances? It's the big question, really. I'm wondering if it actually is a useful tool for the police. Only 15% of the people that you stop and search, you arrest as a result of stopping and searching them. That the ratio, the proportionality hasn't changed markedly across the 5 years that this committee has been in existence. It's difficult for the police to give us clear data as to how much of a deterrent stop and search actually is, because that would be an opinion more than anything else. But one thing we do know is stop and search, excuse me here, really pisses off the community and has some real tangible costs to those groups within the community who feel they're being disproportionately stopped and searched by the police. So that's why I've come back to the big question. Is this something you should be doing at all? Is it actually a useful tool? Because it doesn't seem to me on the basis of evidence to show that clearly.
And before you answer, Rob, I'm just going
to say, you can imagine, Karen, we've had these discussions in the past, and I really welcome getting back into some of the tricky issues with this, and again, that bit about the going into the right level of granularity around the data and what's driving behind this. I think there are bits that I would like to see tweaked. I think there is absolutely some legitimacy in some areas, but this is always one where it's tricky stuff, isn't it? And the good thing is, I think the challenge that Mark raises is absolutely a good one, and it makes us think. But I would like to break it down into some key component parts, I think.
Okay, so just hold that thought for a minute, because I have a couple of questions too. So what I would really like to understand more is under the ethical questions you posed, again on point 6, the areas of policing focus. Why would there be a police focus? I'm not saying there shouldn't be, but I just want to understand the reasons, because does that form part of the intelligence that's there? And in a couple of the body-worn video examples we saw this morning, the intelligence seemed to be lacking, and we didn't know the full context because we just saw that snapshot of the video. So we'd really like to understand more about that. The other thing that I really want to see is more data around all stops and the different powers that are used. So which, how many stops and searches are there for knife crime? I think there's section 61. How many for other powers, etc., etc., etc. And stops themselves. So stops while driving, for example, which are a big feature of what happens to young Black people. And maybe others, but that's my own experience. So I'm just going to bring Stephen in, if you don't mind. Have you made a note of those? Yeah.
Okay. Got a few of those. Yeah.
Okay, Stephen.
I mean, Rob will answer those direct questions, Karen, about the availability of data. Nationally, the police were expected to record stopping accounts for a period of time, but that was stopped because it was regarded as a bit too bureaucratic. Which is, I think problematic in many different ways. I think I just simply want to add to what's been said before, and in particular add to what Mark said. For me, and again, we've got those questions about, you know, the ethical questions at the start. For me, I think the force should be asking themselves the question, you know, the big question of what are they using stop and search for, and why are they using it? And, you know, particularly as the PCC said right at the start, nobody asks him the why questions. And I'm beginning to see and think about a distinction between what we talk about in these meetings in terms of overall strategy, but also what the reality of day-to-day policing is. So we've talked in the past about, you know, the effectiveness of stop and search and its usefulness as a tool in relation to gang crime, in relation to county lines, in relation to knife crime, and the importance of that. And we've talked about that at length from a strategy point of view. Yeah, I think, and again, they are snapshots, but I think the ones that we observed this morning showed us the reality of day-to-day policing of stop and search. And we saw 3. And we saw 2, which were Misuse of Drugs Act searches, which were looking, I mean, in reality for small amounts of personal use of cannabis. And we saw 1 PACE Section 1 search for stolen goods. For what were, and we identified them as basically, you know, for want of a better phrase, our members of the community who were particularly marginalised. And as I said this morning, I found that a particularly distressing search to watch. You know, these were not about serious high-level drug dealers in relation to Section 23. These were not serious searches in relation to or serious organised criminality. This was everyday policing. And I think, and again, those were only 3 in a snapshot. But if we look at our paper A, sorry for looking on one side, but I do have a second screen. I mean, I've got that on our. We've got that detail on that you asked for. Saw that, Karen, on page A3 of that graph of stop and search by reason. And 7 out of 10 stop and searches are for Misuse of Drugs Act. Now, undoubtedly, some of those will be pretty serious, you know, high-level criminality, but I would bet my bottom dollar the vast majority aren't. And that takes us back then to what Mark was saying about the costs and the benefit and the cost-benefit analysis, what this means in terms of communities, how they feel that they are policed, as opposed to what actually stop and search is being used for. I mean, interesting, if we go to that graph on A3, Rob and I have talked in the past about stop and searches as used in knife crime. Searches for offensive weapons are less than 2 in 10. You know, if that's what we really were doing this for, the force could still massively scale back the amount of stop and search it does, still target that sort of criminality. And as for the, you know, one of the so-called benefits of stop and search is that general deterrent effect. There's the research literature says that just simply doesn't exist. That it's not there. Stop and search is not an effective tool. So I think we need to, you know, I unlike Mark, I will concede that there is a small benefit sometimes for its use. I think the force needs to really think about when that is, and to try to move away from its use as an everyday power in the sorts of situations that we see in different forms of policing to deal with those sorts of problems would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Stephen. Rob, over to you.
Well, firstly, as always, really, really good challenges. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and pick a few of those and work my way backwards. So the big question that Mark that was like the heavyweight glove going straight in, but Mark, I absolutely agree with it. The big ethical question is, should we be using stop search? I think where we are, drawing on my 28 years experience, I think stop search is actually a very, very useful and operational tool. However, I think ethically, where I think we are as a service is I think there is an absolute recognition that the power has to be used responsibly. And I think the ethical question that we've probably taken away from here is it being disproportionately used in response to low-level cannabis use or something in that regard? So what you would have seen in the paper that we have got the Coercive Powers Group looking at, and we are looking to amend our training, is around the use where drugs and the possession of drugs solely is being put down as a reason for that stop search. I'm sure you know that the NPCC guidance does not it doesn't advocate the fact that that would be grounds alone. So just making sure that ethically that is being explained. Now there would be those views may have the view, well, actually, is searching a group of people for drugs, how much of that is as a response of concerns in local communities? Because again, just trying to bring a practical police head to this, more often than not, you will get complaints in certain communities of youths congregating in certain recreational areas, and the perception is that those young people are taking drugs. And a very crash approach to that might be to go down and search them all because it's suspected that they're taking drugs. So you might smell cannabis in the area, you go down there and then you routinely search everybody for drugs. I think as a force, what I can say to you is we are moving away from any of that, and there'll be a lot more scrutiny taking place in regard to the use there. I think, and I sort of touched on this the last time we came together, this is the work that we're trying to do with the DMU. Because when you think about the numbers, what I'm really interested in is what's the driver behind it. How many of these stop searches are carried out as a response to a call from a member of the public? So we need to differentiate between what is a call for service that requires a policing response, which might involve a stop search, versus what is a proactive policing use of the powers. And one of the bits that Karen, you raised was the area policing focus. Is, what's the intelligence driven behind it? And a lot of that is based on areas of high crime. So if in a particular area there's a particular crime trend, that might have additional officers deployed there in order to respond to that. And I can think there's a number of areas across the force where we're doing knife crime, robbery related operations, and you would expect there is likely to be a stop search element to that type of operation. Now, in that particular community, you might argue, so if there is a certain geographic area which has got a high population of Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, and the offenders and victims are from that community, and stop search is used, that will have an impact on the disproportionality figures when you aggregate them up across LLR. But in that locality, you might say, well, actually, it's truly representative of what we're responding to, the offenders and the victims profile. So for me, and I've said this one before, and I know you recognise we're really trying to get to that level of detail. That is what we are saying to the DMU. We need to take this level of data to a more informed level of granularity, but the area that we're looking to, I think, scale back is very much around the self-generated, self-initiated stop search linked to the possession of cannabis.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, thank you, Rob. I've got Mark and Stephen wanting to come back in.
Stephen,
Mark.
Do you want to go first?
Mark.
Okay. I'm going back to point 6 on page A1 about intelligence-led stop and search, and referring that back to the data we've got here, that as things currently stand, that intelligence-led approach results only in around 15% of stops and searches resulting in an arrest. If I was wanting to be brutal here comes the heavyweight punch, Rob. I'd say the intelligence-led approach isn't very intelligent based on the evidence of what it results in terms of arrest, which is why I asked the question, is it... I've really changed my position over 5 years here, because at the beginning of the Ethics and Integrity Committee, I would have said, yes, I think if used wisely, if used on the basis of good intelligence, stop and search is a useful police tool. I can see that. I don't feel that any longer, and I don't think looking for granularity and looking for greater precision is going to necessarily get us away from the difference in proportionality that has been consistent across those 5 years, and where we can say that if you're Black in Leicester and Leicestershire, you're 5 times more likely to be stopped and searched than if you're white, which is has led me to question my original thinking about it being a useful tool. What would the cost be of not doing it at all? Not very much, I don't think. And the cost of continuing to do it seems to me to be quite high.
Can I come back on? And I totally welcome the view, and hence why I invite you to give me as much of that sort of the questions and the data so that we can link it into this next phase that we're going into. I do worry that we run the risk, though, of slightly oversimplifying our response. So if I think of how many incidents I get contacted about where a person is seen in a street with a weapon and officers are deployed, and this is a daily occurrence, this is happening, a daily occurrence, we are deploying officers to localities where a person has been seen in possession of a machete or a knife, or there's been some form of altercation. Officers are sent and they'll carry out an area search in that location. Now, they might stop individuals and they might do a search. It's a moment in time. Does that mean that they could have discarded the weapon? They could have discarded the knife? We shouldn't lose sight of the fact of how many people then end up and we then arrest people. So the 15% mark, what I would say is, if you've got a group of 4 people involved in an incident and they all get stopped and they all get searched and one's found to be in possession of a knife, you know, that person is likely to be 1 out of the 4 that gets arrested. So statistically, I think what we talked about last time in trying to aid our understanding is separating out the numbers of people versus the number of incidents. So if there's 5 people involved in one incident, so Rob Nixon calls in, said a group of youths have run down the road, they've got a baseball bat and a knife, and we stop 5 youths. That's one incident. So it's trying to understand how many occurrences we're having that involve stop search. Start from a member of the public that calls us that is genuinely fearful of something or has an expectation the police are going to do something. And I think there's an element of understanding the ethnicity of that caller as well, because actually it starts there, doesn't it? Somebody's calling the police and saying this has happened. So I think understanding the victim and the ethnicity of the originator, then there's the appropriateness of the police response and the use of powers, and then understanding the outcome, but then seeing that in the locality of where the incident's taking place. So I don't at all want to come across that I'm hiding behind granularity of data, but I do think we need to get into the actual detail of this. And likewise, I'd like to see what's the ethnicity of our officers doing the searches, because, you know, we are increasing the number of Black, Asian and minority ethnic officers that we've got, and those officers will be carrying out stop searches. So, you know, it would be really interesting to see how many Black and Asian officers are carrying out searches against Black and Asian people.
Thanks, Rob. I've got Stephen and Gail, and then after that I'm going to round this up and move on. Otherwise we could talk about stop and search for the whole meeting. So Stephen.
Yeah, just some of it in response to what Rob said, and some of it sort of in addition to what Mark had said as well. I mean, Mark's talking about his experience of thinking about this over the last 5 years of being a member of this committee. You know, as Rob's well aware, we've been talking about this in policing circles since the Scarman report, if not before. You know, this goes back much longer than 5 years, and that's one of my big concerns. I'm not saying the world is the same now as it was in policing in the 1980s. I think far from it. But it's a long-standing problem, and I think it's one why challenging questions need to be asked. I've always been a harsh critic of the use of stop and search and its effectiveness. I've made no qualms about that, but I've always made it perfectly clear that I think that there is a role, and I'm sort of addressing Mark's with anything else now. You give a really good example of that, Robin, as to whether the use of stop and search is proactive or reactive. And if you're reacting from a call to the public, one of the things a good stop and search can do is alleviate the need for an arrest, which is a much more coercive use of power. And that's in the code of practice as to what it's supposed to be there for as well. So I've got no problems. I can see its use in limited circumstances. But I think you're right. And I think the force does need data on how often this is used as a reactive response and how often it's proactive. But in terms of that reactive response and what we describe it as intelligence, I think we need to make, and this is more than simply a semantic distinction. I think we need to make a distinction between intelligence and intelligence-led policing and information-led policing. I don't think if you're responding to a call from the public, that's necessarily what you would describe as intelligence-led. That's you responding. And we're talking about different things there. So in some of your responses, Rob, you're talking about this intelligence-led approach. What you're really talking about is responding to a call from the public. I think intelligence-led for me is something where you've done some deeper work as a force and have went, right, we need to target in this intelligent way these things. And I think that's much more defensible as well, because it goes back to what I was saying earlier around the ones that we observed this morning. And some of those probably were as a result of calls from the public. But there were always choices about policing styles and what you do there. So, for instance, in your example, you talked about trying to deal with crime hotspots, and you might use stop and search. I would hope as a force you're going to be using more problem orientated, and actually, your reactive response is going to be part of it, but much more minimal response, I would have said. And obviously, you'll be doing that. But one last thing, and I think this is really important, and this goes back to how we're talking about this and what is on the ground. You gave again the example of a call to the public about somebody holding a weapon. We know from those figures that you've given us, that's a really small amount of what you do. I'm much more concerned about those 7 out of 10 stop and searches, which are Misuse of Drugs Act. What are they for? What are they achieving? What level are they? And what harm are they doing to community relations?
Yeah.
Okay. Gail, did you want to make a comment?
I've got a few comments and I'm going to be really brief.
Please.
So firstly, I agree with Rob. I disagree with Mark to the extent that I'm not per se against stop and search. I think there is a place for it. I think there is, there are some circumstances when it should be used. I want to pick up on the point that Steve made about the difference between intelligence and information from the public. And I think, we have to be very honest, and the information that you get from the public is like the rest of society, and there's racial bias from the public sometimes. So if we're responding to information from the public, we need to look at that in its whole. And just another quick point, it's because we actually had a brief discussion about it this morning, was about the ethnicity of police officers. And I do feel that that could be part of an improvement. However, I really still feel that it's more about the culture of the police service and policing. So regardless of whether your police officers are from ethnic minority backgrounds, that's not necessarily going to address the issue, because they're working within an organisation that may well have that racial bias. So if it's a black officer or an Asian officer, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be any less racially biased in their policing. There's lots of other things, Karen, but I think we should move on.
Well, I was going to, Rob, you might want to come back in, but what I was going to suggest is that because we've got, obviously it's a very rich theme and we just want to keep talking about it, but we're not going to resolve it on this afternoon. Maybe I have a few solutions, but we're not going to agree them this afternoon. You said you'd try and get us access to papers, and it would be great if we could have a kind of, a subgroup looking at this, and maybe just have a couple of people from the committee just helping with having a look at the DMU stuff that's coming forward, having more discussions with whoever is handling it, so that we're not waiting until the next meeting or the one after that to come back to this. I'd like to keep it burning a bit, if that's okay.
Karen, I will snap your hand off, because I think hopefully, and I know the panel have got this, and we've talked about the ambition of becoming, the most inclusive force. This is one of the emotive issues, isn't it? Let's deal with it. So for me, I think it is absolutely centre stage with the stuff that we're looking at here in force. Hence why, there's 2 bits of research that we've got going on with the academics. One is around the internal experience of people from Black and Asian and minority ethnic communities. So Gail, your point there about the culture, that's something we're trying to explore. Well, what is it like to join the police service and come from Black and Asian minority ethnic communities? So there's a bit of research going on with that, but that whole use of more data, being more informed, using AI, I think it's a great opportunity for you to shape and join with us on some of that, so that we can really truly take it to another stage. Because it does feel that we have a similar conversation, don't we? So I think we've just got to get underneath it and then say, so what? What I can say to you as the committee today is we are really alive to that element of the drugs that Stephen talked about, and that is something that we are doing quite a lot of work on at the moment.
Lovely.
So I'll gladly bring that back.
Thank you. Mark, you're allowed 30 seconds.
Happy to volunteer. You know, my PhD is maths and stats, so happy to help with that.
Oh, okay, great.
So
yeah, well, mine was philosophy, so will that help? I'm not sure. Okay, thank you. Can I conclude that conversation here, and we'll take it forward via Rob and a subgroup or something like that. Absolutely. So if we could move to paper B, which is the reverse mentoring, and again, I'd like to. Do you want to say any words of introduction, Rob, or shall I go straight to the points?
Well, I guess it's. I'm very conscious that obviously Rupert has joined the meeting, so probably hasn't heard of this as yet. So one of the things that we were trying to do is, and again, it links to culture and it links to becoming that sort of like the most inclusive organisation. We recognised there was lots of people that weren't being able or didn't feel confident to have difficult conversations and ask questions around different faiths and communities. So the reverse mentoring pilot, and hopefully you've seen what we've done is we've aligned somebody from an underrepresented community with a senior officer, and we've basically said, right, this is a reverse mentoring. So for senior leaders in the organisation, you've got somebody here that will check, challenge, you can ask difficult questions of, and we ran it for a pilot period. You will see that effectively the results of that have come into our internal board, which is the Race, Religion and Belief, which I chair. Lots and lots of good feedback. There's some mixed things in there that we need to work our way through. But effectively, as an organisation, where do we think this has taken us? I think there's a lot more positive than negative that has come out of it. I think people have really started to trust one another. They've really started to increase their knowledge of what are concerning communities. And as senior leaders in the police, that's got to be a good thing. So I think overwhelmingly it feels the right thing to do. Where we're heading with it, so you'll see in the paper that there were 3 proposals that were brought to me in the RRB, and effectively we're doing a hybrid of option A and B, which is on page 5, which is we're going to continue the pilot. So those that have got mentoring relationships, carry on, keep them going. But what we're looking at now is bringing out the learning, seeing how the learning can then inform our equalities training, how we can inform some of our internal comms. We're doing some stuff around internal language, because we've picked up some feedback around the term BAME. People don't like it. So we're moving away from that, and we're using Black and Asian minority and ethnic communities. And what we're looking to do is to integrate the learning from that into our leadership program going forward. So I think actually what started out as a pilot has turned into a really good thing. We're going to continue it. We're going to and then expand the offer as part of our leadership training for future managers and future leaders of the organisation, but also using what's coming out of those conversations to again shape and amend policies as we go along.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rob. I'm going to invite comments. I know there were some in the pre-meeting, so I know that Mark, Gail, Lynn, you had comments before. Would you like to, Gail?
Yeah, so firstly, I commend you on the programme and the project. I think it's a really, really good thing to do. I've had some experience of this personally and professionally, and I think, well done for kind of, doing the pilot. I think in terms of my comments, I would say that I'm really glad to hear that you're continuing the pilot. I think 6 months probably wasn't long enough initially. I did read in the paper that, some of your mentor and mentee relationships were only able to meet maybe once or twice during that 6-month period. So probably not really long enough. So it's really good that you're extending the pilot. And I also wanted to know, I was a bit concerned. I think that when these schemes work really well, yes, of course, it's about hierarchy, but from what I understand with the police force, it is very hierarchical. And I just wonder whether those people who were being the mentors, who were from minority backgrounds, how confident they would have been on kind of challenging really and saying things that they may think, well, you know, is this going to affect my promotion prospects if I'm really honest with this person in front of me? So that was one of the things. And the other thing, I suppose, was, you know, I'd quite like to know maybe later on when the pilot's been extended, who actually from those senior leadership roles, you know, got involved. Because my personal experience was, you know, it was that the people who were already woke, who were already kind of into these issues, kind of signed themselves up. And it was the high level directors in my old organisation, the ones that we really wanted to get involved in the scheme. They were the ones that, you know, didn't sign up because it was voluntary. And I'm not suggesting at all that it should be made mandatory, because I don't think it should. No. But I'd like to know going forward, you know, who are those very senior leaders that get involved in the programme? What is their commitment? You know, and I think others, I won't steal others' thunders, but, you know, we did have conversations about training, etc.
Thank you, Gail. Rob, are you happy for me to take the others, or do you want to come back on that now?
Whichever way you want to do it, Karen. I'm happy whichever.
Thanks. I will take Lynn and then Lois, and then see would you like to come back. Lynn.
Thank you. Yes, I think reverse mentoring is a great way to engage your younger and newer employees as they join. And I do think it helps with a large organisation, especially a hierarchical one, because I think it shrinks the organisation and allows for really fresh perspectives to be heard. So I'm really encouraged by the pilot and the result, and the fact that 86% of the participants felt, you know, it had been really meaningful. And I was particularly struck by people reporting back that it helped people examine unconscious bias, because that's something that we've raised before at other meetings in other areas of policing. So I'm very pleased to see that. And also where good intentions have resulted in unintended consequences, and that's just brilliant, because that's a quick way to resolve, you know, issues, and particularly around recruitment and media campaigns. I was really struck by that what others felt was attractive about policing could actually be not attractive to some cultures. I thought that was, you know, an excellent example of what can be learnt and how you can make big changes very quickly. So, you know, I'm a great enthusiast for reverse mentoring. Thank you.
Thank you. Lois?
Hi, thank you. I would have liked to have seen a bit more in the statistics, because it seemed like a very small scheme with 24 people taking part. And one of the things that it doesn't show is how many had 4 meetings, how many had 1. And I think that would have been very useful. And also a couple of comments in it that say that there were some that didn't find it helpful, but it doesn't say why. So none of the less positive data has been fed back. And there is also, I would also like to have seen addressed, is there are some criticisms of unconscious bias training. And I think it would have been useful to address that in the document, to say why you've used it and how it's been laid out.
Thank you, Lois. Do you mind if I just add a point of my own, Rob, and then you can come back?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So I also am a bit concerned about the ethics of using reverse mentors who are on a much lower grade. And my question is really, what do they get out of it? Is it, I don't think there's money involved, but are they getting paid because the people that they're mentoring are on a much higher grade? Or is there some other benefit? I'm not that sold on reverse mentoring schemes, but I mean, maybe the evidence will prove me wrong, just because I feel that the training that people higher up are getting should be there anyway in place. And I'm not sure that we should be relying on people that are on much lower grades to be able to do that. So that was my point about reverse mentoring, just what people are getting out of it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, can I work backwards from that one then, Karen, if I may? Because I think in terms of, because it sort of links to the point that Lynn made around them being younger and newer. And I know I've sort of shared with the committee previously, one of the big strategic issues for us is around 42% of churn. So a lot of sort of time served people in managerial position, leadership positions will be leaving the organisation. And so one of the sort of unintended benefits that have come from this is those that have volunteered to be a mentor, often of a more junior rank because of where the profiling of the force, they're getting immediate access to and building a relationship with the senior leader. So they're imparting knowledge and insight around their experiences, their perceptions, their views on where policing needs to go. So they're almost like shaping the future of the force through imparting their experiences and helping educate the person who's the mentor and the mentee. But likewise, the flip side is they become the mentee because they get access to how the organisation works. They get insight into leadership, policing. They get they're getting input on how to think about strategy, problem solving, how to market themselves, what skills they're going to need. So they're getting career progression and advice. Yeah. So I see this. It's a marriage in terms of the person who's in that leadership position is getting a confidant, somebody they can ask the difficult questions of and get insight from. But conversely, the relationship has to be a two-way thing for it to work. Yeah. So the mentor should be receiving greater insight, wisdom, exposure, friendship, guidance from that leader. So, and I think that's why overwhelmingly it seems to be working, because everybody's getting something out of it.
Right, thank you.
So that's that point. I think in terms of so if I go to Gail's point, in terms of where this sort of landed in the organisation, generally in terms of the formal people that went through the pilot, generally it's chief inspector, superintendent level is to where we pitched it, because I hate to say it's that just above the sticky middle. But I would say to you, I mean, I mentor at least 4 or 5 Black and Asian and minority ethnic officers that are considered to be talented for the future. And so whilst it's not part of the pilot, I think it's becoming part of the culture. Right. And that's why I can talk with authority about, whilst I get something from them, they definitely get something from me. And that's what we're trying to drive with it.
Thank you. Does that answer all our points?
I think, let me just have a look down here. So I think so Gail's point was very much around who's involved. So hopefully, and again, I've got no issues in terms of having the transparency around that, but generally it was chief inspector, superintendents. Yeah. I like if we can record the fact that your views as a committee, and again, I'd welcome if that's a consensus around that we shouldn't make this mandatory, because in terms of an offer, we're taking the learning from it and we're including that as part of our leadership training, but at the moment we're not making it mandatory.
Yeah.
So and that feels right to me, and it's good to hear that that's where Gail's view was. Because otherwise it just becomes a tick box exercise, and that's not what we're after. And then I think the only other bit was around the unconscious bias training.
Yeah.
And again, I know that is hugely contentious around. Some people are very pro, some people are very anti. I would say that we do unconscious bias training. It's people get repeat unconscious bias training at various points in their sort of progression, particularly when they become a supervisor. And we also do refresher unconscious bias training ahead of any recruitment and promotion selection process. So that's probably where we've pitched it at the moment.
Thank you. On point 2 on the paper, which is about what should be done to ensure that mentors feel empowered, they need support sessions. I mean, with whoever they choose to have that with. I mean, if it's a Black mentor for a white senior officer, they probably will need some support from somebody who understands race issues. You know, and some. I mean, I'm working with another organisation where I'm doing some training for the mentors and mentees together on race equality, so that they all have that overview. And my final point really is that yeah, I don't really like unconscious bias training myself because I'm not sure that it's been proven to be very effective. But I do prefer the term racial literacy so that we can have a or discrimination literacy, so that there is a program which keeps raising people's awareness of the equality issues. But I think those are the main points. We've answered your points on the paper.
And I think that's why we do it, Karen. So that unconscious bias is exactly that. It just brings it back to the front of people's minds.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm going to move on to paper C, which is the Team Leicestershire Academy. Yeah. So who would like to make a comment? Did you? Sorry, Rob. Did you want to?
No. I think I've explained the reasoning behind the academy previously. This was all about recognition of the rotation of staff. We've brought our training back in house. A lot of focus going on skills development of officers and staff, and this paper really just sort of sets out that journey. It very much talks about phase one, which was to bring it back into Leicestershire, bring together the leadership and the core training to align that with some of the academic stuff, so that we've got some faculties and we're driving it forward. And we've also stood up a technology platform so that we can share good practice. That was phase one. It doesn't cover phase two, where we're heading, but that's probably one for the future.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to invite comments again. Who have I got? Lynn and then Mark.
Yes, thank you. I thought it was great to see the, I've got a couple of comments actually, and then a question. On the comment side, engaging the practice leads and the go-to gurus, absolutely brilliant. It's what we've been talking about for a while. And the master classes and signposting to things like TED Talks and all the other external resources that are already out there on leadership, et cetera, making use of all of that. Fantastic. I really like the that developing of a culture of career learning, rather than feeling, oh, I'm more experienced, I know it all. Be a learn it all, not a know it all, if you see what I mean. So it's like, keep the learning going, because that keeps your brain elastic and it keeps everything being refreshed all the time. So I'm a huge supporter of that. The question I've got really is around, in the strategy, it talks about the vast majority of learning taking place not via structured training, but through workplace experience and what they call developmental relationships. So I wondered if there'd been any consideration of the policy of moving more towards people working alone, and whether that would be reversed. That was mentioned at previous meetings, that there would be less, two-person people going out in a car, more one. But I wondered if that would change in the light of a lot of inexperienced officers coming in.
I think that, it's a really. Do you want me to come back on that one, Karen? I'm very conscious at some point very soon I've got to leave you. Did you want me to come back on that?
Can I just take Mark's comment? He's the only other person with a hand up, and then you can come in. Yeah.
I'll be very brief. I think this is outstanding. I think it's something the force should be very proud of. I think it's a really good example of turning a potential problem into a real asset. So the issue that you've raised with us several times about churn in the police and turnover of workforce over the next few years, you could have wrung your hands about that. I think this is a really creative way of addressing that problem and a number of other issues at the same time. It's something that the force should be really commended for.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
Okay, picking up on Mark's point there. Mark, thank you for those kind words. Just so you know, we're doing some work and trying to get the College of Policing on board with this, because we do think we're at the front of the pack, and it does appear that nationally other people are starting to look at what we're doing here. So I think, Mark, your sentiments there are, hopefully I'm trying to sell that to the college, and then other people can follow our lead, which feels very positive. And going back to Lynn's point around the developing relationships, I guess that narrative in there, what we're saying is that culture of learning. There is a culture in policing where if I've not been called into the lecture theatre and somebody stood in front of me, then I'm not having any training. So partly this is about trying to say that we will enable you to get access to a lot more material, and you need to take responsibility for some of that. So I don't think we'll be scaling down lots and lots of the essential face-to-face training. They'll still get that. and the developmental training is very much saying that it's on the job. So investing in tutors, mentors, trying to get a culture from our supervisors that actually this is not about performance managing people to death. It's about coaching and developing your staff to be really effective. So that whole learning culture from the individual, the tutors, learning on the job, learning from each other. If I dealt with a job today and it was good, how could I share that? Well, I can share that across my peers. I can put it on the SharePoint platform. Other people can view it. It's trying to get that culture of, if you do something good, share it. People will learn from it. If you do something bad, let's get the learning from it and let's stop other people repeating it. So that's really what I'm trying to achieve.
Okay, thank you, Rob. You need to go now, right?
Thank you. It's great to see you all, and apologies that I've got to dip out. And I know that Mick is really, really well briefed on all the PSD stuff.
Thank you, Rob. Bye.
Good to see you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Oh, Karen, did you want me to try and rejoin you if I get 3, or are
Yes,
you happy
please,
to?
just for that last, if you can, but I mean, we might be done.
Yeah, if you're done, and if I don't join you, thank you, but I'll try and get back. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Rob. Okay. So, colleagues, do we have any other comments on the academy? Sorry, on the academy stuff, or shall I move on? Okay. So, paper D then is the dip sampling, and Mick is here to take us through that. Welcome, Mick.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you like me to try my video? I'm just a little bit worried if it crashes, but I'll have a go.
It'd be lovely to see you.
There we are. Ooh. There we are.
Hello, mate.
Good afternoon. Crikey. It's true the camera does put pounds on you, doesn't it? There we are. Good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Okay, well, I'm not sure in terms of what you want me to take you through. Obviously, you've conducted your dip sampling session.
Yeah.
And you've put through your various comments to us. I think most of it appears to be fairly positive, which I hope that's the case. There's been a couple of queries raised that we've answered, I think, in text, and there's probably a couple of other bits I could add. I'll just pause there, really. Do you good self want to go through it?
The ones where it's just got noted, thank you, I think there's no reason to comment on. But where there is a sort of more of text, it would be good just to get a little summary of what the response was on each of them.
Okay. Well, I'll start with the second one down, which relates to a gentleman who was searched while he was in custody. And that search involved, in terms of the thoroughness of the search around the waistband of his trousers, etc. The individual didn't respond particularly well to that, and there was a moment of discord in the custody suite with some sort of abusive language and comments made toward the officers. The whole incident is captured on the custody CCTV. The individual felt that the search was inappropriate and unnecessary. The CCTV shows that to be very much not the case, and we've looked at that, and obviously the final reports come through to myself. It was an investigation, and I'm satisfied that the search was conducted under the correct powers and appropriately, and there's no case to answer for misconduct or any performance issues for the officers, and that matter's closed, and the individual has been given a copy of the report along with their right of review to the IOPC.
Oh, thank you very much. And on the next one, if you could just say whether there was any follow-up on the safeguarding, which was the point raised.
Yes, there was, and in fact I can tell you about this individual. There wasn't just a follow-up on this matter in terms of a public protection notice. There's a much wider plan in place in relation to the individual as well. So I've double-checked that again yesterday in relation to the individual, so I can reassure you.
Okay, and then the next one we need to look at is the one where the question was, why not dismissal?
Oh, crikey, yeah, for the conduct matter.
Yes.
Okay.
Misuse of storm, that one.
I beg your pardon?
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, the conduct matter one I've got here is not one I've dealt with myself. It's one that Mr. Warders was the appropriate authority on, the head of department.
Right.
But they did have a look through this matter, and it was a question where an officer had been involved in an off-duty incident and then returned to look at the system on several occasions. And so we get into the long-standing issue: is that legitimate? And is that for a policing purpose? And my understanding of the report and the subsequent conclusions was that the individual had looked at it in order to decide if he needed to prepare a statement and to look in relation to the outcome of it, and that has been interpreted as a legitimate policing purpose. Now, I suppose some or a fair amount of our cases do have an element of subjectivity and personal view on them. Mr. Ward has come to the view that as a relatively junior, not junior officer, that's not the right word, inexperienced officer, a probationary officer, that he should be given the benefit of the doubt and that be treated as a learning episode. I would concur with that, because I think a very valid point, and one that's starting to come to the fore for us as an organisation, is we do have a very inexperienced workforce. And already we are starting to see that in a number of complaints and cases that we get, where people are acting out of a lack of understanding, and there are some further training issues required. And one of the other issues as well is also in terms of the number of tutors and support that can be offered to inexperienced officers as well. So we are trying to look at things in the spirit of learning, reflection, education and support, and that is very much as well the basis of public complaints as well, because we really want to encourage our officers to come forward and say, I've made a mistake, I have made an error. I look at that case, I've read it, I would concur with that, and I think that would be consistent with the way in which we are looking to treat things as learning and education where possible, rather than the malicious act.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that is the distinction, really. On the next one, I don't think we need to say very much more on that, because that seems reasonable. So I'm going to move to the 13320.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I do know about this one because I deliberated on this one for a significant period of time. And again, it is a data matter. This is a case where stop check has taken place. And there's been a very challenging conversation between the officer who's conducted the stop check and the driver of the vehicle. And I think there was some poor communication and some poor skills showed by the officer in that particular case. It's the officer's responsibility to respond in a positive fashion, even to challenging individuals. That's the nature of the job. There was subsequent contact made with the employer where the details of the stop check were disclosed, and that is inappropriate. The reason that I went on the side of RPRP rather than misconduct is that I'm fortunate I sit in a knowledgeable position that I'm studying policies through a variety of different jobs, and the policy has changed from notifiable associations to one that's called common law disclosure policy, which has now replaced it. I personally had to search for that policy to find it, and it's a policy that talks about which professions you can disclose details of policing incidents and policing contact, and obviously it's meant for things like school teaching, health, nursing, etc., etc. This falls without that, and I think it was very poor practice. But again, there was another inexperienced officer with this officer, who the primary one was an experienced officer. And I have to say, it was, I could say, what's the phrase I'm looking for? It was in the red area whether I was going to put the person to misconduct or to RP. And I think at the time I was doing it, we were in the middle of, I think, no, it wasn't. This is pre-COVID, to be fair, isn't it? Just before that period of time. But again, I've tried to come to a balance of use RP rather than misconduct. But I would concede it is on the red area as to whether I put that forward or not. It's a subject professional judgment, and we're trying as well, particularly now for misconduct and above under the new definitions. It's a higher threshold, so you've got to. I believe that at least a written warning should be given for misconduct, and obviously gross misconduct is for dismissal. So using the higher threshold and looking at the balance somewhere in the amber red area, have gone for RPRP, which is the reflective practice.
Yeah, an apology was given as well.
Yes.
Okay, so the next ones are okay. So I'm down to 60920, sorry, 23020.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, this one is still subject to appeal, so I'm going to be because the gentleman has appealed the outcome of his investigation to the IOPC, so it remains live and pending. I would just make an observation on it in that the gentleman was a victim of a serious assault. The initial charge was one of Section 18 with intent, and then under the direction of the CPS, they went for a 20, which is a lesser charge, Section 20 wounding, which is a lesser charge.
Yes.
So that was a CPS decision. It fell to the officer at the court to tell the gentleman. Could things, and I'm not sure that was technically the best position. It could have been a better conversation, and I think an earlier conversation and a better presented conversation. There's no two ways about that. The gentleman was obviously very disappointed in relation to that, but the CPS had made a decision that was the best balanced approach. There's comment on here as to that you can't charge 18 doesn't carry the aggravated aspect around the racial thing. Well, 18 carries life anyway, I think. It's GBH with intent. So the reason the aggravating factor of the race-related matters is to increase the sentence. Well, in a case like that, it wouldn't increase it because the judge would have the full extent of a sentence that they chose was suitable for that serious assault. So it's the gentleman still isn't happy with that explanation. I don't want to sort of move the book, but it is a CPS decision at court when they talk to the defence.
Okay.
And I think we acknowledged in it that there could have been a better conversation with the individual to explain that without a shadow of a doubt.
Okay. Thank you. That's very kind. There's only one other comment on this paper that right at the beginning, it says the IOPC non-referral register was not examined on this occasion. I think that used to be in the front of these reports, but we actually did have a look at that non-referral register.
Yes, my understanding was you did dip sample some and you were happy with them. Yes, and that remains available to you, obviously, on each occasion.
Yeah. So that's very much appreciated. Thank you, Mick. I have a hand up from Stephen. If you're okay to.
Yeah, sure.
Question, Stephen.
Yeah, that Section 18, Section 20 sounds like it's a classic CPS plea bargain. There's nothing you can do about
that.
No, in the nicest sense, no. And I understand the gentleman's frustrations, but I don't think at the end of the day that will have affected his sentence because the judge still will have significant powers and custodial period available.
Yeah.
I mean, I was the one that looked at this and I just thought, well, that guy just doesn't, it's too complex, it's too detailed for him to understand. And what he really wanted was a recognition that it was racist in intent. And that's why the conversation could have been better. But yeah, it was. I mean, I found it hard. I had to keep going back to what Section 18 and Section 20 were to just understand the difference. And I'm learning all the time. So yeah, it's difficult.
Mick will probably tell you from a policing point of view, from a practical prosecution point of view, the legal difference is one of the state of mind as to whether intention or recklessness. In reality, it's about what the CPS can get, and so proving intent is really difficult. So you always take a Section 20, particularly if there's a plea that's offered as well.
Yeah, I mean, we understand that. Well, I do now, but I didn't then. But the guy on the other end found it hard.
Well, and I think that's understandable because they made an agreement at court, a plea bargain at court, if you like. Then there was a phone call to the poor chap. Well, that's never the best way to deliver that news. And I don't think our relationship with him was the best anyway, for a variety of reasons. So that didn't add to it. And I don't think in that conversation there was the ability to explain the full circumstances, and perhaps there was no detriment. But we are where we are, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Gail.
Yeah, just a question for Mike, really. In terms of, you've mentioned a couple of times about the quite a lot of people who are early on in their career. Do you ever extend the probationary period, or what's the policy around that?
Yes, that can be done actually, and That's a very current question, because we've just done that with somebody on a job that they've done. You'll probably see that on your next dip sample. That we have raised a little bit of concern about the volume of young and inexperienced officers coming into the workplace. And when you listen to today's conversation, the issues you're discussing, it's not just the fundamentals of policing. It's a much wider appreciation of the skills and the listening and the communication and the awareness that you've got to have. So we have raised some concerns about that, and we also raise as well some current areas of business that we're concerned about, that we see a trend of. So, for instance, long running, we've been is in quality of investigations and follow up to members of the public. That's been running for a while, and I'm sure when you dip sample, you will see that a lot of it is where people have reported crimes and incidents to us, and they're far from happy with the follow up, the quality of the investigation. That's at least 30 to 40% of our complaints workload. So we're trying hard, and I think it's the right thing to do, and we've always done it in Leicestershire. Certainly for me, my record is less than 1% over the last 3 years of all public complaints going to disciplinary proceedings, because in a lot of those cases, people have made full admissions, accepted, apologised, and are prepared to move on, and we need to apologise to the member of the public as well. Accordingly, I only look to take people to misconduct where I can see a real willful maliciousness or total open neglect for having to look after somebody, their needs, and the deliberate omissions. That's where I believe it should be used. In relation to probationers, if we get, I mean, there's a variety of scales really for well, I shouldn't say probationers, I should say student officers who are in their probation. There's a range really, so we can feed in at any point. So we will feed in about complaints and our awareness through our element of the system, and that will go to managers. Those managers might already be managing wider issues, so us feeding in will inform that debate and their own decision making about extending. And one that we've got at the moment, and it might well affect a second one, is that I've just signed off an investigation where quite frankly, the failings are very, very significant. It's been very poorly handled, and I'm equally more concerned that the individual can't give me a cohesive answer to try and explain their rationale. And what I've said in relation to that is, well, we are at the more serious end of it now. This person's got 12 months in. As far as I'm concerned, you now need to consider if Regulation 13 is relevant. Regulation 13 is the ability to dispense with somebody if you don't think they're going to become a fit and proper officer. And what will happen with that case is that will go back to the probationary development unit, the PDU, sorry, professional development unit, the PDU, and they will have a look at that and say, on its own, should we be dispensing with this person, or should we now pause, extend their probation, and I think this is the way they will go, for 6 to 12 months, and put them on an action plan addressing those concerns. And if you don't come up to scratch, then if you like, you've had your second opportunity, then we'll go to Regulation 13. So we do have a key part to play at every level going through, and yeah, that's a very current example, to be honest with you. I've just signed that off yesterday. I hope that explains the range.
Thanks for that. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's all from us for you, Mick. So yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your comments as always. Gratefully received.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that takes us to the ethical dilemma, the Sarah Everard case. And in our pre-meeting, I think we were all quite clear on this, but I won't summarise just yet. I'm going to allow anybody else to summarise what we discussed. Mark, I don't know whether you want to come in, or Lynn, whether you want to come in. Anybody else? Okay, nobody wants to come in. Then I'll summarise what we discussed. So there were 3 questions at the end of this. What are the committee's views on such gatherings taking place? Should gatherings like this be dispersed? And if so, is the use of force appropriate? And what consideration should Leicestershire Police have if similar events arise in the future? So what we said was the gatherings will happen whether we want them to or not, because when people feel very strongly about something, they will happen. And we had a bit of a discussion about the difference between this and the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, which we felt were very well handled. And this one, we think, just wasn't very well handled in the Met. And we know it's not always possible to have the liaison with the organisers because it may be more spontaneous or just organised in a different way. But I think there are different ways to look at physical spacing without the heavy-handedness that seemed to be happening in London. And then what considerations should Leicestershire Police have if similar events are planned in our force? As above, they will happen. Liaise with the organisers as much as possible. Sympathise with what's going on, or empathise, and do not issue advice, as the Met did, about please stay off the streets, women. We would like the advice to be please stay off the streets, men. So I think just taking advice from equality organisations and being mindful of all of the sensitivities would be our advice on this. Did anybody else want to add to that? I'm aware that I may not have covered everything that people said. Mark? Yay, somebody. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Karen. That was a really, really good summary of what we talked about this morning. The only thing I wanted to add in addition to that was that I referred, as we were talking this morning, to the way in which protest around the G7 summit had been handled, where the various forces that were involved in Cornwall gave people who wished to legitimately protest spaces, nominated spaces, where they could do that safely. And I think that would have been a sensible response from the Met to the death of Sarah Everard, and their intelligence should have told them that these protests would have gone ahead anyway, irrespective of advice not to do so. So I think that in responding to this within Leicestershire, Leicestershire Police would be well to look at the Peelian principles that are the foundation of the police force, one of which centres around liberty. It's not just safety, it's about liberty and freedom of expression. And I think living in a very risk-averse world, we tend to forget about liberty at our peril.
Thank you, Mark. Stephen.
Protest, the right to protest, or if you want to put it legally, technically, the right to freedom of assembly and freedom of expression is incredibly important. Now, obviously, the legal context here in relation to Sarah Everard was that while under the initial lockdown regulations, protest was one of the lawful exemptions for being outside, it wasn't in the second lockdown. Now, if I remember rightly, the High Court did address this in relation to the police's response to that. Regardless of whether that right was necessarily in the regulations, I think the police should always be taking the point of view that that right to protest does exist, and they should read it in. One of the things that Human Rights Act makes clear is that all legislation has to be read in a way that's in accordance with our fundamental human rights, and freedom of expression and freedom of assembly are those. Now, obviously, they can be limited, and one of the reasons to limit them, as we see at the moment, is the middle of a pandemic. In protest, I think, regardless of the context, is always something that the police should be doing. I would disagree with Mark on that point there, in relation to it's a good idea to say you can have this safe space to protest. Sometimes, as it was put, I've been in research recently. I've been looking at the trials of the protesters who stopped the print works and closed the print works. And one of the things the police tried to do there was to say to the protesters, can you protest off the road, please, rather than in the middle of the road, which would have completely taken away the value of their protest, which was to stop the road and stop the newspapers getting out. They were making a comment. As the defence lawyer described that, with the right to with the right to freedom of expression comes the right to be heard, as he described it. So sometimes protest has to be disruptive, and it has to work in a way that, you know, causes others inconvenience. It's about that balance as much as anything else. So I think the police should be doing what they always should be doing at every protest, and asking the question first and foremost, how should we facilitate this in a way that maintains public order? There's nothing new. I don't think, you know, and that's what the Met didn't do. They didn't put police in a way that facilitated protest and maintained public order. No. And that's always, you know, one of the ways you can escalate a protest is by heavy-handed policing, and nobody really wants that.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Okay, so the last thing on the agenda is the COVID-19 update. I don't know whether, Sally, you're able to do that, or we might have to pass.
Sorry, Karen, it's Angela. I think you'll need an officer really to give you that update from the force. Rob hasn't rejoined us, but we can carry that forward to the next meeting.
That's fine.
When things will have been lifted again.
That's absolutely fine. Okay, so the date of our next meeting is, do we know, Angela?
17th of September.
17th of September, that's great. And is there any final comment from anybody, including Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, you caught me just as I was typing a thing to put into the chat, actually. Yeah. I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for... oh, I haven't got them. Gosh, I switched the... So I've just realised I switched the camera off when I took that phone call. I do apologise. I've been sitting here with you not being able to see me. Sorry. I just wanted to say thank you. I found it absolutely fascinating. I thought some of the things that were coming out about how grievances work, complaints and grievances, which I sort of hadn't.
Oh, we can't hear you at the moment. I don't know whether you switched your mic off. Mr. Matthews.
Just thank you very much.
Yeah.
So thank you. And carry on the good work, I suppose, is the phrase, isn't it? Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay. Anybody else would anybody else like to comment? Okay, in that case, I'm going to, oh, Mark, are you popping up as though you're going to say something? And Stephen's popping up as if you want to say something. No?
Goodbye.
I want to say goodbye. Okay. Well, have a lovely weekend, all of you. Watch the football if you like football. But, oh, I do. So I'm going to watch that. But anyway, yeah, and I shall see you all again next time. But hopefully we'll get this subgroup going on Stop and Search. So watch your emails and we'll take that forward as well. Amazing.
Yeah, I'll be in touch about that, Karen. Don't worry. We'll take it forward.
So much. Amazing comments today. I really enjoyed that meeting myself. I want to say thank you to Angela and to Teresa as well for just supporting us so well. And look forward to seeing everyone next time.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.